Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children 18 plus, you are tuned in to the Loan Officer Podcast with me, Dustin Owen, and a very special guest all the way from Hermitage, PA, by way of Nashville, Tennessee, in front of our first live studio audience. This badass mortgage professional businesswoman in her third full year in the mortgage industry closed 180 units, of which 80+% was purchase, of which 100% was referred to her, meaning she didn't buy a lead. Her name is Sara Cipriano, but we affectionately call her Sip. Sip, welcome to the Loan Officer Podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so stoked to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
Okay, 180 units. We're going to jump right into this.
Okay.
Okay, for those that are tuned in that aren't mortgage professionals, just know that's a shit ton. And by the way, shit ton is metric, right? So it is a shit ton of loans. The average mortgage loan originator closes somewhere around 30. 30.
Really?
You did 5 times that. You did over 5 times that, right? You did 6 times that. You did 6 times that, and you've only been in the business for less than 4 years.
Correct.
Okay.
Started here with Waterstone in 2017, the end of July, and I am probably one of those people who didn't know how to spell mortgage. So
2 G's, 1 T.
You didn't know
Yep,
that?
Yep, it's 2 G's, 1 T.
Right.
No, you told me a story like you barely knew the difference of Fannie and Freddie like just a year ago.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember calling Jesse, my boss, and I said, this is going to be a really dumb question. And I know I've worked here for 2 years, but can you tell me the difference between these two? And he goes, are you being serious? I'm like, yeah, I really don't know. So, yeah, we had to go through all of that.
Yeah, your boss, Jesse, he's an amazing dude.
Correct.
That dude does like 600 units a year.
Yeah, he's a great example to learn from, for sure. You learn about all of the small loans, all of the, well, our jumbos are like, 150, you learn
That's
about all this
thousand,
stuff.
not million.
Yeah, That's true.
Yeah, because for those that don't know where Hermitage is,
right,
it's the border of Ohio and Pennsylvania.
Correct.
Right, so your branch that you work out of is technically an Ohio branch.
Yes.
Which is kind of odd because I don't know if you don't know this or not, Ohio's not even a real state.
I mean, I believe it.
Yeah, yep. So I don't know how you're able to lend with a branch that's not really affiliated with the United States of America, but that's a different subject and probably a whole different episode.
Yeah.
But no, here's what I want to figure out. Like, how and why? Why you and how? How did you figure out to do what so many other people haven't? Like, what was your approach? What was your training? But before we get into that, how did you get into the mortgage industry? What did you do prior to the mortgage industry?
So before Waterstone and mortgages, I worked for the largest bank in the country, and I was a private client banker. So I would help people with checking accounts, savings. I did referrals for investments, referrals for mortgages, and I just did that every single day. And it got to the point where I thought, I don't know if I can do this for 30 more years, just sitting in an office, having people yelling at me because they overdrew their checking account from Starbucks. And I'm like, I don't think I can do this anymore. So another loan officer that works with Jesse also used to work at the bank. And he came in one day, Nick Zajakowski, and he said,
shout out, Nick.
I know, he's wonderful. And he said, Sip, what's wrong with you? Like, you just seem like you're a little off. And I'm like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And he said, you should go talk to Jesse. And so I thought, okay, I'll go talk to Jesse, fully not expecting anything. But I thought first, and I've worked at this bank for 10 years, so I'm going to try to be a loan officer here first because...
Was that your first professional job out of school?
No. So I started right out of high school. I was supposed to go to college and ended up not being able to go because of family issues. And so I started with Citigroup doing personal loans. I worked for Citi Financial. And so I worked there for 5 years. And then, they had some different things happening higher up. And I thought, well, I should probably look for something that's a little more sturdy. And that's where I ended up at this other bank. And, but yeah, so
But you weren't happy. I think that's where you were going is
right.
You weren't happy. But
No.
didn't you ask Chase that's where you worked, right? You worked at Chase. And you asked Chase if you could become a loan officer. What'd they tell you?
They said, well, you don't really know anything about loans, so we're going to go with somebody who might, know a little bit more, who can bring more to the business. And my boss there was great too. And I said, listen, if I don't get this, I'm just telling you, I'm going to start looking. And he goes, I fully get it. And so I went and I talked to Jesse for a half hour, and which I don't know if you know Jesse. For his phone to not ring for a half hour was a pretty big deal, and I caught him on a lucky day. So we just sat there and we chatted, and he's like, yeah, if you want to come work here, like you're hired. And I'm like,
what drew you to the mortgage business?
So I knew I was good at referring to both investments and mortgage, but investments, it's good to know about them, but when you're dealing with someone's livelihood, it's a little intimidating. So I thought I want to impact somebody that could be, maybe they couldn't buy a house, or it's a huge thing, a huge milestone in their life. And, it's kind of a one and done deal, or so I thought, and I thought, I'm not going to ruin anyone's life. I'm not going to lose all their money, but I'm just going to try to make it better. So I picked mortgages instead of investments.
Any part of the income potential, was that even a motivating factor? Did you have an idea of the type of income opportunities this industry offered you?
No.
No.
And in fact, I made good money at Chase. And I went home to my husband and I said, so I kind of think I want to try to do this, but it's all commission. Like there's no salary. What do you think? And he's like, well, if you want to do it, I support you. Like didn't even bat an eye. And I'm like, but you understand I might not get paid for a few months. And he goes, I think it'll be okay. He's like, whatever you want to do, I 100% support it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to sleep on it because that seemed a little too easy. And I said, okay, so I slept on it. And the next day I called Jesse and I'm like, hey, I'm in. If you'll have me still. He goes, yep.
Had there been other times in your life where you had to bet on yourself? Or more importantly, you were forced to bet on yourself and it all turned out okay, that maybe gave you the confidence to take that leap?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I go down, it's not going to be because I didn't work hard enough. And I knew the one thing that I knew I could do is give time, and I knew my work ethic. So I knew that I could do that. I mean, since I was 18, and I think I had told you this before, my parents have been divorced, for many, many years. And I actually got kicked out 10 days after I graduated.
From high school?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So, which is one of the reasons why I couldn't go to college. So, I mean, I worked 2 and 3 jobs just to live. I mean, I didn't know what else to do. So, I wasn't afraid of work. And so I figured, well, everyone keeps telling me if I just work hard, it'll be fine. So I'm like, I know I can work hard. So.
Did you go into this with any type of a mindset like, hey, I have to give it 6 months or 12 months or 24 months?
No, not so much that, but I thought to myself, I need to at least close $250,000 a month in loans for me to feel okay.
Okay. So you would figure that out
really
from a commission income standpoint, like, hey,
Yeah.
if I'm closing $250,000, which like for someone like Gwen Swain in Idaho, that's like half a loan, right? But for like you and Jesse in Youngstown, Ohio, that may be like 3 loans.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and last year everybody knows, was a pretty fortunate year, but I think my average loan size was $137,000.
Wow, $137,000. And what was your purchase refi mix?
90% purchase, almost on the dot, 10% refi.
Yeah, in a crazy refi market, you were still 90%. And I know I introed it this way, but I want to hear it again. And you spend how much money on leads a month?
Nothing.
All realtor referred, friends and family, circle of influence.
So I learned, that's the one thing I did learn very quickly working here is it's a good mix. It's a mixed bag. So when I was maybe 3 months into it, I knew 3 realtors. One of them was by default, they were a friend, and they introduced me to the other 2. And they kind of sent me some stuff here and there, but they didn't really trust me because they knew I didn't know how to spell mortgage. That's not, wasn't a secret. And so one of them, her husband ended up getting very sick with cancer. One was away on vacation, and the other one was just slow. And so I was like, what am I going to, like, nobody's sending me anything. Like, this isn't good. Like, I totally am ruining my family's life. Like, what am I going to do? And so I started to try to think outside of the box where, I had a lot of bank friends. So I'm like, okay, well, there's loans they can't do. I mean, not everybody will go down to a 580 credit score. Not everybody will lend on like single wides, which in Pennsylvania, those are a thing. I know a lot of you.
They
might
are in
not
Florida
know.
as well. They are in Florida as well. You're good.
So I just started reaching out even to those people. I thought, I don't specialize in home equity, so I might get some of those leads. So let me send those to you. But if you have a turn down because the bank's more strict, send them to me. And so I started making those relationships even with other bankers in the area, which you wouldn't think like loan officers can be friends, but we're all friends and we just like pass stuff off all the time.
Here's what I'm hearing you say, which I love. And the biggest tie down or takeaway is you leaned into what you had.
Yeah.
You had a 10-year banking industry where you had relationships with other private bankers at other bank branches who also knew the loan officers that you were referring business to when you were a private banker. And you're like, okay, well, how can I work with you versus work against you?
Right.
And this is key for anyone who doesn't work for a bank. If you're a broker, you work for an independent mortgage banker, something that we can actually sell is, look, we're not going to go after your deposits.
Right.
Because that's a private banker's biggest concern is, well, you're going to, if I refer you the mortgage, you're also now going to get their checking and savings, then you're going to get their credit card, then you're going to get their 529 and their IRA. And you're like, no, we don't do that.
Right.
No, I just do mortgages.
Yeah.
And I don't want the good mortgages. I want the mortgages that you guys are passing on because you're too lazy. Did I say it like that? No. To actually put in the work to get it done. We had a guy on the show a year ago now, but his name is Mike Williams, and Mike crushed it like you. Right, out of the gates, just on fire. And dude came from the car industry. So what he didn't know how to spell mortgage. He didn't know that Fannie and Freddie were brothers and sisters and that their parent is the FHFA. Like, he knew none of that. But what he knew is that he had a cell phone. That cell phone had 1,000 people's names and numbers in it because he sold them trucks. And he didn't just sell them trucks. He sold them Denali's. He sold them Yukons, the nice, expensive trucks. So he picked up the phone and did what anyone should do that is successful, driven, and entrepreneurial. He called and said, hey, if you trusted me with your truck purchase, you can now trust me with your home purchase.
Yeah.
Right? You couldn't lean in the way that Mike did, but Mike couldn't lean in the way that you did. I think the important thing to know is you guys had something to lean into and you took advantage of it.
Yeah, and it was really for me just trying to think outside the box because anybody can call and solicit realtors. And they almost expect that, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like we get solicitation calls from other banks. You just expect, like, if you're breathing and you're doing a loan, like somebody's going to call you and say, hey, do you want to come work for me? Well, it's the same thing with trying to get, referrals. So it's like, well, who are the people who really don't get their door knocked on? I was trying to think of outside the box because, again, I'm new to this. And while I knew people in the community, like, they're like, well, I don't really know if you know how to do a loan. So
of your 180 units, do you know how many were referred by your bank friends versus how many were referred by realtors?
I got to be honest, I don't pay attention to the numbers ever. And I never did at Chase. I never did anywhere. And I always did well because I feel like if you're just doing the fundamentals, if you're just answering your phone, if you're just being nice, if you're just doing your job, it's all going to fall into place. And I don't know. I couldn't tell you right now how many loans I have in my pipeline. I have no idea. I just work. I don't know.
I think it's awesome. One side of me is like boiling inside. I just want to grab you by the ear and pull you into the corner and we're going to have a talk. The other side, I'm like, God, that's so endearing, right? Well, that is so genuine. That is so you. You don't need to tell it, but do you know your W-2? Ish?
Sort of.
Sort of. Wow. I love it. One of those.
Yeah,
One of those. Hey, I'm going to be a good person.
Well,
I can't believe Jesse called you a hillbilly.
He always calls me all the time.
I can't believe Jesse called you a hillbilly. I don't see that at all. I don't see it. Maybe he said you live where the hillbillies live.
Believe this. I introduced Jesse to the, is it a cistern? The spring properties. Jesse never heard of one of those until, good old Pennsylvania came along.
She chews. Okay.
I do not
chew. For those that didn't catch that.
That's not true.
Sarah's manager, the guy who brought her into the business, actually just yelled out that she chews tobacco. It's an inside joke. Hey, a little rabbit hole there.
Yeah.
What do you say to your realtors? Like, what's I'm gonna try to bring this at you. I think I know the answer, but I want everyone else to hear it. What was some of the best advice your manager ever gave you? Speaking of your manager.
Yeah.
What's some of the best advice he gave you when you were getting started in the industry?
So, I think I kind of said a little bit about it, but he literally said, listen, I know that you don't know everything about loans. He goes, I don't care about that. You literally have to answer your phone. You have to be available. And you don't have to know all the answers, but I can't tell you how many times I tell people, I don't know the answer to that, but let me call an underwriter. I'll find out. They think I'm calling an underwriter, and I'm calling Jesse like, hey, you ever heard of this situation before? And he's like, oh, yeah, you got to do this. But
You're like, hey,
really
Jesse, what's that FAHA loan? I'm looking for a FAHA. He's
What's
like,
a FICO?
You mean FHA, Sarah?
I'm telling you, if I would have told you, you wouldn't believe it. But I didn't know what any of that meant.
Yeah, no, I remember when we did our prep call, you're like, yeah, when Jesse hired me, he basically said, I need you to pick up the phone every time it rings.
Yeah.
I need you to be nice to people, which is evident already that just comes natural to you.
Don't tell
But didn't he tell you to learn to tell a joke?
Yeah, well, and so...
Or be funny? Learn to be funny?
Yeah, well, and I feel like I'm a little bit funny already, but it's funny because, he uses his Hoyer joke all the time. And I'm like, I don't know who that is, but I've used that line because, people know what that means. I don't know who Hoyer is. I don't know who, I'm assuming a Brown.
Brian Hoyer played football at a bunch of different NFL teams. But originally he was this guy named Tom Brady. It was his backup.
Okay.
So everyone knows who Tom Brady is, but do you really know who Tom Brady's backup is?
No.
Like right now, Tom Brady's going to win a second Super Bowl in Tampa Bay for Tampa Bay. I have no idea who the guy's backup is. And I think Jesse's script to realtors was like, hey, you probably already have your Tom Brady. That's okay. Let me be your Brian Hoyer.
Yeah.
Right? And
I've used it. I don't know who that is, but it works,
That is fantastic.
So,
yeah, that was your way of telling a realtor, like, look, I don't need to be your everything.
Right.
But let me bring some tools and add some tools to your tool belt that maybe you don't already have. Maybe it's single wide financing. Maybe it's down payment assistance. Maybe it's low FICO. Mm-hmm. Now, eventually they're going to get to know you. They're going to fall in love with you the way everyone else falls in love with you. And then it's going to be like, well, Sip, why don't you be my everything?
Well, and
why don't you be my Brady?
Yeah.
Because that's the ultimate, right? You want to be someone's Tom Brady.
Oh, for sure.
But you may have to be willing to be their Brian Hoyer, who I don't think he plays in the league anymore, but you can look him up. You can Google him. I think he's Brian with an I. Okay. How'd you learn this business?
Jesse. Honestly, sitting with Jesse.
Okay. Jesse DiGiacomo closes 600 units a year and has 50 employees. Jesse single-handedly taught you the business?
Here's the thing about our team that's unique to anything I ever worked with. Like when you worked at, Chase or a lot of these big companies, it's so competitive. They want you to do well, but they don't want you to do well or better than them, right? But when I came to Waterstone, I sat with John Rishel. I sat with Rob Polifka, who does our disclosures. I sat with Levi DiGiacomo, who's our operations. I sat with Jesse. I sat with Frank. I literally bothered these guys like a bill collector. I sat with all of them because I didn't know anything. And so I thought, I can kind of muddle through disclosures a little bit here and there, but I just didn't know. I didn't know how much money they had to put down. I didn't know that, 400 was a bad score. I didn't know anything. So, I just wanted to try to be a sponge. And honestly, our entire team, they never got annoyed with me. They're like, yeah, I used to go in. Jesse would be mid-meeting, and I'd be like, can I come in here? And he'd be like, yeah. So I put a chair in his office, which is not big, and we just sat there, and I just listened to everything. So
yeah, no, I love that story. Like you shared that with me when we did our prep call 2 weeks ago. But when I hear you talk, and I hear of anyone else who's tuning in that wants to be the next Sarah, it's okay, well, first, do you work for a good manager?
Yeah.
Look, we all work at Waterstone Mortgage, and Waterstone Mortgage is a great company, but we're not the only great company. There's a dozen other great companies out there.
Sure.
Right? But you have to find a great leader. You found a great leader, and you trusted that great leader also partnered with a really good company.
Sure.
Right? But I would tell anyone who's looking at their own career, it's well, who's in your corner? Who has your back? Who has your six? Mm-hmm. And is that the person you want to be more like? And if it's not, then you probably don't work for the right person. You found a great person. But then what you did that I think so many others don't do, you were tenacious and resourceful all at the same time. I'm sure those people you were mentioning weren't calling you saying, hey, Sip, I heard you just started. Why don't you come sit with me for 3 hours? Let me teach you your job so you can go out and make a fortune. No, you reached out to them and you probably charmed them in your very nice, sweet girl next door way, right? Told them a joke or two. Told them a joke or two, right? Grabbed your spittoon and said, and sat down
boy.
with them. But I mean, here's what I found in this industry. People want to help people. In general, we as humans are good people. Like, we allow the 10% of outliers to make the rest of us look like scumbags, when really we're not. The 90% of us are good people if you just ask. And Jesse DiGiacomo will give you some of his time, right? And Mike will give you some of his time, and the disclosure desk will give you some of their time, but no one's going to call you up and invite you in. You're just going to have to like knock on the door and say, hey, do you mind if I come and do X?
Sure.
So I love that because it teaches me that there's no one way to learn this business. You know, like I tell people, oh no, you need to do Zenix Ground School, and then you need to do a greatness tracker, and then you need to do the 12-week challenge, and then you need to go to this class and get this coaching. And that very well could be true, but I meet you and you're like, maybe, but not really. You don't need to.
No, I mean, I just never, you know, we try to stay just really humble. I mean, and it's honest when we say small loans matter. I mean, we do things that, you know, $50,000 loans, and those are the loans that nobody else wants to do them. Nobody wants to do them. But then once you do that and you save enough people, I mean, that's still a commission for a realtor, right? So it's still a paycheck for somebody, even though it's only $50,000. And they're like, wow, she's going to take her time and do this. And it's probably garbage, but they're still going to do this and they're going to get it done. So over time, they start sending you different kind of business. You know, you still get those things, but I mean, just to do anything. And that's the other thing. I mean, I was always willing, I feel like, to try anything, whether it was a 203K, you know, or anything like that. I mean, if somebody wanted to write a loan, I didn't care what it was. I was going to try to figure out how to do it.
Is that still today, or was that just early on in your career?
Oh, no, I still do that today.
You still today?
Oh, yeah.
So you don't punt anything?
No.
No? Good for
No.
you. Good for you.
No.
What motivates you? What motivates SIP? What keeps you going?
I would say probably my family. You know, like I have a 15-year-old son. Well, he's 16 and he races.
Cars. Races cars.
He races cars. So you know, that's fun.
Expensive.
Yeah.
Okay. So that motivates
So,
you.
I mean, it's motivating, but I mean, honestly, I don't, and it's not even, you know, the money or the loans or awards or anything. It's just literally doing the right thing for people. It's honestly just that. Like, it's not anything else. It's not, you know, I want to get an award and I want to go on a trip or I want to make this much money a year. It's just, I feel like if you start focusing, at least for me, I don't want to focus on things to where I lose focus for what I should be doing, which is just the right thing for people.
Yeah.
But when you focus on the numbers all the time, then that becomes your focus, and then you can get skewed on what the right thing to do is.
Yeah, no, you're tugging at my heartstrings right now, because it's something I'm very passionate about. Like, we as loan officers, we play a pivotal role in the American society. Like, if you think about this, like, most financial advisors do not want to talk to anyone unless they have $100,000 in assets. Okay, well, they don't teach financial literacy in high school. They don't teach it in college, right? Most of us didn't grow up at dinner tables, right? Where if you did sit down and you had a family that sat down and did dinner together, were you talking about budgeting? Were you talking about ROI? Were you talking about invest this, tithe this? No, those conversations weren't had. So as a loan officer, you are that person. Like, you single-handedly got to impact 180 people's lives, where you were the first person to teach them about credit. You were the first person to teach them about budgeting. You're the first person to mention to them about what is an IRA, what is a 401k, what is a 529, right? You need to have 3 months reserves, 6 months reserves. What the hell are reserves, right? Like, as loan officers, if we do our job right, it is about the people. So to hear you say that, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're tugging at my heartstrings, because it is about the people. Look, the money is awesome, right? The job sometimes is shitty. It's okay. Right? If you can trade the shittiness for the income, but then keep in mind what you just said about do it for the people. Like you, Sarah, you are for the people. Yeah. That is what you do. You are the people's loan officer. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, he was the people's champion. You're the people's loan officer.
Hey, I'll take it.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so we're short on time, so we're gonna have to start wrapping this up.
Okay.
But when did you know that this was for you? At what point in your career? Like, was there ever a moment where you're like, yep, I'm bitten by the bug?
I mean, I honestly, within, I would say a month of, and I hadn't even gotten paid yet, so that's a little bit weird, but just within even a month of working here and working with this team and seeing like, oh, if you have a question, you could call the CEO, and that's a normal thing. People do that. I knew then, I'm like, okay, I found my place, and I found what I like to do. And ever since then, and I say to our team all the time, I'm like, I don't even know how this life happened.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what happened in the last 3 years, because I honestly just don't. It's just, everything's such a blessing. And, you have bad days, and you pray on it, and you're like, the next day's better.
Yeah.
You just leave it all there.
Good things happen to good people.
I hope so.
What would you tell yourself 4 years ago? You're hopping into this industry. What advice would you have for Sara 4 years ago?
I would say, and I even have to remind myself this sometimes today, is not to assume things. So people know their credit situation. People know their money situation. They know what they can afford, what they can't. And sometimes, even now in my own head, I get myself psyched up, like, I got to make this phone call. I got to tell them their credit score is a 550 and it's going to take 6 months to credit repair them. And it freaks me out because this society, everything's instant. We want everything to happen right now, and instant gratification. So I make those calls and they go totally fine, and everything's fine with it, and people understand and they know, and they're happy that somebody took the time and a little bit of effort to even help them. So, and it's for, if an appraisal comes back bad, or, if anything like that. I guess I would tell myself not to assume how a conversation is going to go, and just have the conversation, because the realtors know if the window's cracked and it needs repaired. They're just hoping somebody doesn't see it. You know what I mean?
Very true.
It's that would be the one thing that I would say, is to try not to assume what's going to happen. Don't outplay conversations before they happen. Just have the conversation and be in the moment,
What do you wish was taught to you in high school that now, as a business professional who's uber successful and experienced, looking back at yourself 17 years ago, or when you're 17-year-olds or 18 and your mom's getting ready to toss you out of the house, what is something you wish you knew earlier on?
Not to be afraid to take a chance to change your outcome, because, everybody's obviously dealt a different hand. But if you're not happy doing something, change it. And it's totally okay to change it. And sometimes you have to go out on a limb, but you just kind of know in your gut, like, if it's going to be good or not. Like, don't wait 10 years. If you don't like something, change it.
I love that. Our COO, Rich Tucker, I don't know if you know this, but in his office, he has one of my favorite quotes ever, which is, nothing changes if nothing changes.
That's it.
Sara, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on all of your success.
Thank you.
She's Sara Cipriano. I'm Dustin Owen. That's all the time we have for you today, but we'll catch you on the next episode of the Loan Officer Podcast. Peace.